Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I'm your host, TheWriter. This is the show where we sit here and I regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. Now, if you recall, the Ouroboros contract campaign ended last time and we find ourselves on the brink that the world has split open as the Terrasque and the Ouroboros, god of the Yuan-Ti, fight over the planet, and the planet simply cannot take it. And in their titanic battle, the whole world comes apart. Pretty much everybody dies. The dwarves are gone, the elves are gone, and only one section of the world remains alive. Now, how does that happen? Because the planet blew up? Shut up, it's magic. But, basically, one tectonic plate from our planet survived. It was covered with forests and jungles and lush land, and it was surrounded by mountains and had plenty of water, etc., etc. So it kind of became like a shard world, an island drifting in the endless nothing, or still orbiting the same star. It's just, hey, the world is much smaller and now it's flat. So we lost 99% of the world, and the 1% that remains, everybody clings to life on this tiny, tiny island. It's maybe the size of, well, I don't know. It's a tectonic plate, so it's rather large. I don't know. The nations have fallen. Everybody's died. Borders do not mean anything anymore. There's pretty much not a lot of anything left, so resources instantly become more valuable. Things like wood, food, water, places where you can farm, livestock especially. The price of everything increases like tenfold because those that could used like plane shift spells and like jump ship to other planes of existence, whether that be Galorian or the Forgotten Realms, Ravenloft, anywhere else where people could reasonably survive. The ones that could, pretty much gone, and they took their knowledge with them. So those that remain are the ones that are shit out of luck, and this is kind of what's left of the world. But wait, T, I hear you saying, whatever happened to Amanda's half-demon baby, the one that grew to adult size and ran off at the end of the last campaign? Whatever happened to her? Well, she was one of the survivors to remain behind in this island world, if you will. And some interesting things started happening. So think of this as an in-between kind of episode, because the Ouroboros contract ended when we unleashed the Terrasque onto the world. And Goddess Wheel, the next campaign, didn't happen for another 1,000 or so years. So this place kind of stabilized itself. The population shrank and shrank and shrank until there were, few enough people, few enough livestock that, given the amount of space they had, they kind of made it work. And, they just kind of cling to life on this rock, hoping that somebody will save them or that the gods will return, etc., etc. The gods are really finicky in this setting, come to think of it. They interfered a lot during Wicked Master, and then in Shadow of the Northern Plains, they were delivering messages, and then in the Ouroboros campaign, they wouldn't even hardly talk to us, and now, they're pretty much gone, and people are hoping that they will come back. But Amanda's half-demon baby, now she's half human, half elven, and half demon. And if you remember her description, she's pink-skinned, yellow-eyed, and has a tail. Now, does that remind you of anything? D&D veterans, do you remember maybe about the time 4th edition came out? Does that sound like anything particular? If you were paying attention to all the details, you might know that you just witnessed the birth and rise of a tiefling. Like one of the very first tieflings that me and my group of friends ever witnessed. A tiefling is someone who is at least like 1/4 demon or fiend or something like that. They have they have evil blood in them, and not in the same way that a sorcerer does, but in the way that it still shows physically. So they can be all different colors of the rainbow. They have really unusual eyes. They can have tails. They can have horns. They can have wings. They can have hooves for feet. And, never all of those things at the same time, because they're at least like half or 1/4 of whatever. And most of them, a good portion of them, are the products of rape, as this one was. And, they live as outsiders. They live among minorities, as crime lords, as assassins, as like shady dealings, because the world rejects them. They call them demon spawn, hell spawn, pit spawn, etc. So tiefling, as much as 4th edition wanted to make them a race, they're more like a half race, except they're unlike like half elves and stuff. Tieflings were actively hated by most of the mortal races. Now, because this tiefling, and I know the rule like technically says they have to be like a quarter demon or something, but this tiefling was half demon, so she was very potent. She was very long-lived. She basically had the lifespan of an elf and the power of Daddy, the demon or the archfiend or whatever that raped her mother. And like we said, she went from baby to adult form in about 12 hours and ran off and disappeared. She basically rose to something nigh unto godhood, and her story was very long and complicated, but I'll sum it up in a few paragraphs for you. And she took on a normal name. It was like Natishka or something like that. And Natishka, being as long-lived as she was, she had no concept of good and evil. She only had instinct, and she ran from her birth mother. Like we said, she acquisitioned her powers very quickly. Invisibility, growth, shape change, doppelganging, any amount of daily powers that tieflings got back when there were daily powers, which I hated. Like Hellfire Blast or whatever they get per day. And, she lived out in the woods for a while, and she lived among men for a while, and she, the world became, like I said, just one tectonic plate. So the world was rapidly changing around her, and she was in a prime position, both power-wise and age-wise, to kind of take over. And just rise up as a symbol of those that had survived. And the people that gathered around her basically called her a goddess or like a mother god or something like that. That she was so powerful and so, I'm trying to word this correctly, but potent is the best thing I can think of, because her father was an archdemon and her mother was a very, very powerful sorceress. So she grew up strong, sexy, and unconquerable in any capacity. So whatever she wanted, she got, and anybody that told her no got burned to a cinder. And just, she didn't ever learn the value of money. She didn't ever learn the value of human life, anything like that. But she was still half human. So she had the capacity for love, for nurturing, for building things. And, having done several circuits around the world, if you remember, it's now surrounded by mountains, and anything past those mountains, you fall into the abyss, and that's it, because the world is flat. Having done several circuits around the world, she discovers that, the world is a finite place, and, the people that are here, that's all we've got, so best to make the best of it. So did she ever reconcile with her mother? Nope. That mountain range didn't make it. Did she ever meet the party members from the last campaign? Nope. And all the dwarves went down in those mountains when the Terrasque and the Ouroboros fought each other. And what became of them? Well, they destroyed the planet, so you can probably guess what happened to them. Neither one made it. Because, hey, when you throw something into the sun or into the core of the earth and it's not sealed away by magic, it burns, divine or not. And Natishka, it's hard to kind of describe this because, again, I could probably write a book about her lifetime, but the long and short of it was she realized how small the world was, how small the population was, and that if she rose to power, she could probably take over most of it. And like lead the people, not necessarily with an iron fist, but like with a strong woman's hand, you know? And she had a lot of different husbands. She was very long-lived, and she had a lot of children. A lot of children. So she ended up with men. She ended up with elves. She got pregnant with a dragon at one point. She had a whole bunch of children out all across the world, but she favored 9 of them in particular. And those 9 ended up like portraying divine abilities or demonic abilities, however you want to say that. And they were long-lived, very powerful, nigh indestructible beings, and they were worshipped as demigods. So it became, Mother and the 9 children. Basically, a new pantheon appeared for this tiny, tiny shard world because the rest of the gods abandoned them. The Ouroboros was killed. The Wanti are extinct because they kind of got what they wanted. So whatever realm they moved on to in spirit form or hell or whatever have you, they got what they wanted, so they're gone, I guess. And with the Ouroboros being dead and the Terrasque being gone, these are the leftovers. So Natisca and her 9 children ruled over the world. And it was misconstrued as like holy text or like a new Bible or things like that. But basically all other religions were abandoned because the gods left us. When the chips were down, they ran from the Ouroboros. And in their place rose up this half-demon, half-sorceress woman who was beautiful and caring and ruled them with a fair, firm hand. And, she bequeathed her 9 children, basically like slices of a pizza pie. Here are 9 territories. Each of you can have a piece of the world, and that's how it's going to be. And then she moved on. Where did she go? We don't really know. She could have gone on to Galorian or Ravenloft or any of the other realms, but she was so powerful and again, not as scared to go to bed with whoever she wanted. And having lived for 1,100, 1,200 years in the same world, she outlived a lot of husbands. So they respected her as a woman, as a leader, as a goddess, and eventually it all got twisted up in holy texts that she had created this world even though she didn't, and that she brought her 9 children here to rule it for them even though she didn't. She had a lot of children, and a lot of things got twisted around and moved and switched and written in poetry that got misconstrued. And eventually it all came out to something called the Infinity Book, which was kind of sort of a history book of what had happened since the world became like this island. And, it's been 1,000 years, so nobody remembers that the world used to be round and that there used to be a Terrasque and an Ouroboros fighting on it, that there used to be this spherical planet. They've long since forgotten this. It's just a tiny world, and they live on it, and they like it. This is, they don't know any better. But the Infinity Book was written to kind of explain, sort of, because not all the facts are right. It was written to explain kind of their place in the world and what happened to the mother goddess, Natisca, and the 9 children. And I thought I had lost the Infinity Book a long time ago because it was written. This was like an actual text that we had at the table. And it became the focus for the next campaign, which was called Goddess Wheel. So I actually have it right here. It's like 8 or 9 pages, but it was written like a holy text. Like, this is what happened. This is how things went down with the mother goddess and the children. This is why the world is the way it is now. And I lost it for a long time, and I found it buried in like the folders and folders and folders of like old pictures and maps and character sheets and other garbage. And I was just digging through it all the other day, like trying to decide what I should put on Facebook, the D&D Stories Facebook, and stuff like that, because this is actually, Goddess Wheel was one of the most well-documented campaigns I ever had, that I just kept everything. So I can actually read this to you verbatim as to what people have been shown happen to the world. Now, the Infinity Book, of course, like all religious texts, kind of fell out of style after a while, and there were no known copies remaining. So Goddess Wheel, as a campaign, became like a go fetch sort of quest, where they would look for pages of the Infinity Book and try to string it all together to learn the story of why the world is the way it is. Now, obviously, it doesn't go back past the Terrasque and the Ouroboros, but it does start when the mother goddess, quote unquote, came to the world. So I'm going to read this to you, and you can kind of get a sense of what kind of world this is, and kind of get your palate flavor going for the next campaign, which is Goddess Wheel. So I'm going to read this to you. Part 1, the Genesis Conflict. In the beginning, the mother goddess forged the island world and saw it was good. It was covered with lush jungles. Placing a great lake in the middle, she surrounded it with jagged mountains so that no one would fall off the world and into the abyss. On the vast island world, she placed her 9 children to live among the mortal races. The 9 of them walked among men and women, camels and dragons, and many others. My children, this world is yours. Live, love, and lead it to prosperity. The goddess left her children on the island world and moved on to the next, telling them, "You will forget your names until one of you leads the others and leads the mortal races to prosperity. Without your names, you will be mortal in nature, and your powers only a fraction of their potential." The 9 children begged her not to go, but she left them. The 9 children of the goddess looked at each other and said, "Let us build our own cities and decide which one of us will lead later." They all agreed. And so the 9 children erected great stone cities. They had temples, both to themselves and their mother. They each built grand homes and had many followers to populate their cities. The mortal races loved them all and worshipped them as demigods. There was a great prosperity for many years, but the wishes of the goddess weighed heavy on their hearts. One of them had to rise up and lead the mortal races, as well as his or her fellow siblings. "Let us name each other until we learn our real names," they decided. "We will decide who will lead later." So they gave each other names. Milo, Healer, Silver, Olam, Watcher, Puppeteer, Drod, Venom, and Little Brother. The mortal races rejoiced that they could now call their 9 demigods by actual names. Another age of prosperity went by, but always did the 9 worry who among them would lead. Finally, the 9 of them met at the Goddess Wheel. "Who will lead us? It is not fair to pick amongst ourselves." Quarreling amongst themselves, they finally decided that there could be only one, not 9, in this world. Separating for the final time, the siblings decided that whenever they met again, they would do battle until one emerged victorious. With the 9 brooding over each other, the island world suffered, and its endless waters and jungles gave way to sheer deserts. Grand parasites and world eaters began to emerge and chew away at the underbelly of the world. Now, the Goddess Wheel was a building, a labyrinth, basically. It was, well, not really a labyrinth. It was just a huge stone building with hundreds of rooms. No doors, no traps, nobody lived there. But this building was a source of some mystery, so we'll get into that later. But the Goddess Wheel was basically a big landmark, a monster building with over 900 rooms in it. All stone, all mosaic, all nice. And the reason it was there was a bit of a mystery. So, the next part, part 2. The fall of silver. Hundreds of years after the Genesis conflict, which was the first part, Silver lived alone in relative peace and became a paladin for good and law. Away from his siblings, he had no desire for blood or conquest over any of them. He did not care to rule the island world, but he did not think any of his siblings really deserved to either. So he stood aside in seclusion and let them sort out their own battles. There was a young girl near his lair on a grand estate, Elizabeth Matreon, one so beautiful and kind the dragon sought her hand. Silver was a dragon, sorry. Silver offered her father gold, gems, livestock, everything he had to have his blessing. But he refused him outright, calling their union an abomination. Despairing that he could not have her, the dragon went to her daily and ate bread from her hand in the form of a white swan. This went on for many months. Unable to take his heartache any more, Silver revealed himself to her as he truly was. Knowing his intentions to be pure, she promised herself to him. From that day forth, Elizabeth refused all suitors despite her father's wishes. She only remained at the oasis day after day, feeding the disguised dragon bread from her hand and spending time with him in secret. One day, Elizabeth's brother came to her. "You wait for the dragon our father turned away, don't you?" he said. I will help spirit you away, and you can be happy, dear sister." Overjoyed, she hugged and kissed her brother as he told her the plan to take her far away. Floating on the water in the form of a swan, unbeknownst to her brother, Silver listened intently and then flew away to meet them. The brother and sister traveled far away from the Matreon estate and lands under cover of darkness, traveling at night and hiding in the day. "My sister, I will take you far away to the mountains in the northeast. There you can wait for your love to find you." Elizabeth happily followed her brother, and they snuck further and further away across the desert. Their father sent men to find them, but to no avail. Elizabeth and her brother traveled for several weeks to the mountains in the northeast at the edge of the island world. There they saw a large white swan on a tiny oasis, who became a dragon. Their brother was afraid, but his sister hugged and thanked him dearly. Then she ran and hugged Silver's muzzle, for he was quite large when he was in his true form. "You have my thanks, bringing me the desire of my heart, young Matreon," Silver said to Elizabeth's brother. "I give you half of my great treasury, gathered over hundreds of years." The dragon gave him a mighty chest that held many chests worth of treasure in it, and sent him home. Taking Elizabeth to his home in the mountains, the dragon built a large home for both of them in a system of caves. Taking the shape of a human so that he could hold her at night, they eventually conceived a child together. The elder Matreon, Elizabeth's father, heard that somewhere a woman and a dragon were to have a child. Knowing it to be his missing daughter, the elder Matreon told his son, who had hidden the chest of treasure so he would not be suspected, "Go and find your sister and bring her back to me." Fearing his father's wrath, he cowered before him and told him right away where they had gone. Calling upon the power of a mighty sorcerer, when the battle-worthy Matreons arrived at the mountain home of Silver and Elizabeth, the elder Matreon sealed the dragon within the caves where he lived. Bound only physically, he used his icy breath to kill many of the Matreons in a mere moment. "Why have you betrayed me, brother?" Elizabeth cried as more men swarmed around Silver, who turned into his draconic form to fight many men. She cried bitter tears as her love was injured and her family members were killed. "I have not betrayed you, I am saving you," his brother lied, for their father was nearby and within earshot. "Give me your baby, and we will flee from this battle and return when it is over." He took her newborn baby, and she fled from him. Her brother, however, delivered the baby into the arms of their father after the Matreons fled the cave-bound dragon. Calling the child an abomination, the elder Matreon spoon-fed it poison. Elizabeth tried to stop him, but her brother held her back. Shocked and heartbroken, Elizabeth fled in sheer sorrow. Grieved to exhaustion, she found her way back to Silver's arms far across the desert, and died of exhaustion in his arms. Lonely and angry beyond all measure, the dragon cursed the Matreon family, forsaking his paladin vows. Using dragon's magic, and that of his mother's, he bound their souls to their very mansion, trapped forever, once they died their natural deaths. And, because Elizabeth's father, or brother, had betrayed him with his lies, he cursed their tongues to forever only tell the truth. The white dragon mourned his love, bound forever within the massive cave. Her brother came one day, also mourning his sister. Grief-stricken, he begged forgiveness, but the dragon would not forgive. He ordered the young man to build a tomb worthy of his love, and then return to him to die. The young man obeyed, rushing to carve out a mountain with as many men as the chest of treasure could hire for him. Penniless, he slaved for years to carve, build, and make the tomb protected. He put it within the family graveyard at the edge of the mountains, but it was far larger and more complex than any tomb before it. When he was done, he placed Elizabeth's body and the baby's body within the tomb. Aging rapidly, but more muscular from all of his work, Elizabeth's brother returned to Silver to face down his final punishment. "I am ready to die, dragon," he said. "No," Silver told him. "I have one more task for you." Silver had had many years to think over what had happened. "You are a coward, and you are a thief, and you are a liar. But you loved your sister, and you did not kill our baby. Your father did." The dragon charged him with one final task. "Go and seal your father within Elizabeth's tomb, and then return to me to die." Elizabeth's brother, knowing that he could not say no, obeyed. He returned to the Matreon estate, and when the time was right, he kidnapped his father, stuffing him in a large sack. Using special herbs to keep him asleep, he put him in Elizabeth's tomb and placed 4 stone guardians over his coffin. Chaining the coffin to the floor so that he could never get out, he left the tomb once more and returned to Silver. "I am ready to die, dragon." "No," Silver said. Instead of killing him, Silver addled his mind and sent him away to forever wander the earth and not know why. "Let none disturb me as I mourn my love Elizabeth and our newborn baby," Silver said, his warm heart slowly growing cold and uncaring over the decades. "I was happy once, but no more." Little brother found Silver alone in his cave, half-starved and grieving for his mate and child years later. Silver put up no resistance at all, and little brother slayed him with a heart-piercing strike through his armored dragon chest. "You have killed me, brother," Silver whispered as he bled out upon the floor. Heartless, little brother stole Silver's hoard after he died, walking away across the desert sands. "You are the first of us to fall, Silver," he said. "You won't be the last." Next part. Healer's Sacrifice. When Healer heard of Silver's death, she was saddened. Like him, she did not wish to fight with her siblings to the death. In fact, she was in love with her elder brother, Drod. Her opposite in almost every way, he fascinated her to no end, and she longed to be in his arms as a lover more than a sibling. The 8 remaining children of the mother goddess were tense since one of them had been slain. They all knew little brother had killed Silver. They could sense it. But they did not blame him. After all, this was war. Healer sat alone in her great square home amongst monks who practically worshipped her like a goddess herself. Around her home sprang large bodies of water called lakes, in which everyone practiced the sacred athletic art called swamming. Anyone who practiced such an art was considered closer to the mother goddess and the healer herself, since water was life in this desert land. At Healer's home, water was so abundant that one could be completely submerged and swamming among large creatures that breathed water as we do air. Plants flourished for hundreds of stretches around her home, a grand oasis in the desert world powered by Healer's affinity for pure water and air, everything that plants needed. It was there that Healer lamented for Drod of the shifting time and grew heartsick. Even when she bathed herself in the lake around her home, not one of the monks looked upon her as more than a sacred leader. No man dare touch her, and no flame kindled in any of their hearts. Despite being surrounded by those who worshipped her, Healer was lonely. Healer sent letters to Drod, begging him to come and visit her, but he refused her when he sensed her intentions. We are siblings, dear Healer. We cannot be together. Even though no mortal looks upon us like they look upon each other in love, we must bear the burden of having no descendants. If we were to meet, we would go to war until one of us was dead, as the 9 of us promised when we met last. His letter made Healer sad, and she didn't leave her home at all for many years. She did not age as the monks did, nor did time scar her perfect mind or skin. She grew massive gardens in and around her home to pass the time, but it all seemed aimless to her, and she grew sick in her heart. She decided to go after Drod, despite him refusing her. She would seduce him and hold him as a lover, as she truly wished from the beginning. With that, Healer set off into the desert, leaving her home and the dozens of monks behind. Wherever she stepped, water rushed to the surface of the sands, and a cool breeze blew. Barely clothed in silk, she arrived at Drod's home, north of her own. Drod's guards, massive men made of metal and stone, came to stop her, seeing her as an enemy. She washed them away with a flick of her thoughts, rusting their metal bodies and eroding their stone parts. "Brother, I have come to see you," she shouted over the howling of the waters she raised. "Come out to me." Drod emerged, leaning on his great staff, his skin green with sickness. "Begone from me, incestuous Healer," he shouted raggedly, conjuring more of his stone guards from the very sands on which they stood. Healer gasped, whisking his stone guards away with her great torrents of water, eroding them into nothingness as she rushed up the great stairs of the front of his home. Collapsing at his side, she grabbed his robes. "Drod, what has happened to you?" she cried upon his green skin. "You are not well." She could not believe that a demigod like Drod of the shifting time could be so very weakened. "Our brother Venom conspires against all 7 of his remaining siblings." He leaned on his staff away from her clutching hands. "All of us but you, Healer, have grown deathly ill. Venom laced the very breeze with poison, meant to seek out all 7 of the goddess's remaining children. You were spared only because the waters and airs come to you are instantly purified," he said, jealous of her. "Venom means to strike us all down at once, and then come after you to finish our war." Healer stood and gazed upon the breeze, extending her magic and looking out across the desert with wide open eyes. "I see the breeze is laced with Venom's poison, a cowardly strategy." She raised a soft hand to the sky, walking down the stairs of Drod's home and out onto the sands. "I cannot let him do this." She turned and gazed at her brother Drod as sand rushed away from her in great rings. "You won't look at me as I look upon you, brother Drod," she said sadly as a great wind whirled around her, capturing the poison breeze. "But I will always love you." She smiled at him sadly, and with a great breath of air, inhaled every last bit of the poison-laced breeze across the desert into herself. Drod of the shifting time watched as the silken garments fell from Healer's body, exposing her wonderful bronzed skin, and watched it turn into a sickly green color. His own skin returned to its normal pale complexion, the poison purged. Healer hugged her own chest, turning into a great column of green limestone, locking away Venom's poison forever within herself, and sacrificing herself in the process. Drod wept for his sister, and buried her in the desert sands. Now there were 7 siblings left. Next part. Vengeance on Venom. When the remaining children of the Mother Goddess heard of what had happened to Healer, there was mourning. Drod sealed himself within his own temple to mourn in private, but some of them went from mourning to pure rage. How dare Venom try to strike all of them down at once? Healer's sacrifice, though mostly for her brother Drod, did not fall on the deaf ears of the others. The twins, Olam and Milo, Scholars and learners in their own right went to go see Puppeteer. "We must strike down Venom together," the two of them told her. "We must kill him before he poisons the breeze once more and tries to kill us first." Puppeteer agreed, but would not come with the two of them. "I will influence little brother to come with you," she smiled. Puppeteer was very good at manipulating the minds of others and was not afraid to whisper in a few ears, especially that of her brutish sibling, little brother. Sitting in her temple after Milo and Olam had gone, Puppeteer reached out with her mind to little brother. Spending days upon days, she weaved a great spell around him like a solid cocoon, so that there was no resisting it. And when she finished, she cast it upon him. Little brother jolted to a halt in his travels, turning on his heel, and was immediately out for blood against Venom. His mind could not fend off Puppeteer's psychic attacks. He met Olam and Milo in the desert, and together they set out for Venom's lair. Venom's lair was far, far to the east, as far away as he could get from his siblings. His home was a great honeycomb-chambered mountain that had been turned upside down to delve deep into the earth. It gave off a terrible poisonous fume to fend off mortals and dripped with slime and muck. Inside was darker than the darkest places of the abyss, where even a torch would not pierce very far. Little brother led the way in a pure rage, striking down Venom's defenses and wading through rivers of poison and venomous insects. He faced untold horrors, and strange ritualistic symbols covered all the walls. "Venom!" he shouted. "Come out!" Milo and Olam stayed behind little brother, watching warily for signs of Venom's presence. Eventually, when they reached Venom's altar, they came upon a terrifying sight. Venom had created a bodyguard of some sort. It stood over 12 feet tall, towering over all of them. Little brother struck at its metallic armored head with the fiercest of strikes, but it did no good. The guardian seemed immortal, an incarnation of poison and strength and all of Venom's powers. "We will hold it there. You kill Venom," the twins Olam and Milo said. They rushed at the guardian and held it in place with powerful magics. Despite all of its strength, it could not move where it stood, so long as the twins' magic held it. Little brother slew the cowardly Venom with ease, throwing him into a huge pit where his body would break. "Another falls!" Little brother raised his sword above his head, victor once again. The twins released the immortal guardian to fight little brother while they made their escape, before the siblings decided to kill them as well, in one fell swoop. 6 siblings remained now. Next part. Watcher's Descent. Drod of the Shifting Time saw that his siblings were falling one after another, and decided that it was time for him to take action for himself. Traveling across the desert, he went to meet with Puppeteer. "Watcher is far more powerful than the rest of us," he told his sister. "Though he cares not for this world in his true neutral ways, he will be the last one standing if we only fight amongst each other." Drod of the Shifting Time implored his sibling once again to influence little brother and let the 3 of them storm Watcher's home, and it was so. Puppeteer reached out across the world into little brother's mind. She twisted his thoughts to go towards Watcher as his next target in the war between the 9 siblings. Promised aid from both Drod of the Shifting Time and Puppeteer, he was sure to come out victorious. Enticed by the sure victory, little brother met with Drod and Puppeteer and then set out for the edge of the world. Watcher, who was an ancient golden dragon, saw them coming and met them in the desert. "My eyes watch the edge and the abyss at the end of the world, and see across this island world as well," he told them as they stared each other down in the middle of the desert. "Did you think I would not see you coming?" "You may be able to see across this world with your great eyes, Watcher," Drod of the Shifting Time said, "but it will not prevent your fate." And with that, Drod, Puppeteer, and little brother sprang forth to attack Watcher. During the the battle, Watcher inhabited Drod's time magic, throwing a manticle-like spell over his wrists. Bound in the current time, Drod could only watch the fight normally and not with his ordained set of powers. Little brother fought fiercely with the same ferocity he always possessed, but Watcher was very powerful. In the end, though, Watcher was slain. His spirit left his body, hovering in the sky like a great golden mist. "I may be slain, siblings, and descend to the abyss," he said, slowly blowing away in the breeze. "But it is you who will suffer more than I. I watch the world coming apart at the seams, but I will not be around when it comes undone." And with a deep draconic chuckle, he was gone. Little brother was severely injured, and Drod stood to one side with Puppeteer, unsure of what to make of Watcher's words. Was the island world coming apart at the seams? How? Who was doing it? Them, with all their great godlike fighting? Next part. Little brother betrayed. Drod, Puppeteer, and little brother stayed at the corpse of Watcher, uneasy at his words. A great swath of the desert had been damaged. Instead of sand, now there was a great blackness, not of sand, but of sharp rocks and debris. Looking over, Drod saw that little brother had been exhausted by the battle with Watcher. Even with 3 against 1 in their favor, Watcher had been a powerful opponent. Seizing the opportunity, Drod of the Shifting Sands took up his sword. Puppeteer watched in awe as Drod suddenly slew little brother in one strike, severing his head from his body. Puppeteer fled into the desert, also weakened by the battle with Watcher, to recover her strength and her powers before Drod came after her as well. Drod of the Shifting Time stood in the desert, all alone, looking at the vast expanse of sands and nothingness. "When I rule this world," he said, sounding sure of himself, "the first thing I will do is wipe the memory of this desert from the world and replace it once more with lush forest and waters." Sheathing his sword, he summoned up a great wind, which rushed the sands away from him in a great ring. He teleported home and rested in his temple. Slowly but surely, the battle of the 9 was coming to a close. "Little brother was naught but raw strength and brutality," he said, sitting upon his throne. "I, Drod of the Shifting Time, will rule this world, and when I do, Mother will return and make this world the way I see fit, my way." It did not take Drod long to track down Puppeteer and kill her as well. So, we went from 9 children down to 1. And, all Mom said was decide which of you is going to lead, and they decided to just kill each other. So, yeah, sibling rivalry turned up to 11. And that is kind of how this world got set up. It's nothing but an expanse of desert, a few oases, and a smidgen of farmland. So there's a whole lot of nothing out there. And the ruins of the temples of the 9 still remain. And if you guessed, yes, each one of the 9 children represents one of the alignments, good, lawful good, lawful neutral, etc. So that's kind of the setup. And just from hearing that compared to what I told you before, you know that the Infinity Book is misconstrued, halfway religious, probably didn't happen exactly that way, but that's basically the narrative of how we went from Natishka to the 9 kids to having only 1 kid to having no one at all. So in the Shifting Sands of Time, even Drod disappeared. So apparently Mom didn't come and remake the world when there was only 1 left, but Drod did rise to power. So in all eventuality, though, he was mortal. So he didn't rise to godhood. That was not what was promised. So hundreds of years have gone by, and the legend of the 9 has fallen into obscurity, and now there's no one at all. People might worship, in small pockets, might worship Healer or might worship Watcher or, one of these obscure, basically demigods, I guess, but there's not like a world religion anymore. It's passed so far into myth that the idea of gods is kind of gone at this point across the whole population. But there are still zealots out there. There are still cultists out there. There's a lot of like religious material, again, some of it was completely wrong. Like, Notiska did not make this world. She merely survived it and then moved to a different plane of existence. So she could still be out there for all we know. But that's what happened to her 9 children. And that's kind of the setup for Goddess Wheel. So all we've got left is like one continent, and it's mostly desert, and it's surrounded by mountains. And if you leave the mountains, well, you fall off into infinity. And again, materials are precious, wood is precious, livestock, the population has to be very carefully controlled. You thought the world was ending before, now we're standing on a splinter of the world, and that's still ending. So, plus, what's eating away at the bottom of the world? Why is it coming apart at the seams? So, there's a lot going on, a lot that's already happened, and you wonder how long before it all just crumbles and falls apart. Well, it kind of already did, but we're still on a pretty big chunk. So, can we end the world any harder than we already have? You'll have to find out when we start the next campaign, Goddess Wheel. So, I will see you guys next time, and we will start up the next campaign here on D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like button for me. If you want to keep up with channel updates, check me out on Facebook. And if you're feeling especially generous, be sure to visit my Patreon. Keep gaming!